All right, let's get weird for a second. Have you ever wondered what a giant bustling city and, say, a medieval fortress could possibly have in common? Well, today, we're going to find out. We are shrinking down and taking a tour of the microscopic world to explore the fundamental building blocks of life, the cell. And we'll see how animal cells are like these thriving metropolises, while plant cells are more like self-sufficient strongholds. So what do you and a giant redwood tree have in common? I know, it sounds a little out there, right? I mean, one of us moves and thinks, the other just stands there reaching for the sun. But the answer? It lies deep within both of us, in these tiny, incredibly complex structures that power everything. And by the end of this, that connection is going to be crystal clear.
So here's our itinerary for this little tour. First, we're going to get our microscopic lens in focus. Then we'll take a guided tour of Animal City, and after that, we'll explore the formidable plant fortress. Then we'll put them head-to-head to see what really sets them apart, and finally, we'll zoom back out to understand why these tiny differences change absolutely everything.
All right, first things first. To start this tour, we've got to see something that's, well, basically invisible. So how in the world do we map out a place we can't even see with our own eyes? Well, this is our key. We're looking at what's called the ultrastructure. Think of it as the super high-definition view of a cell that we can only get thanks to powerful electron microscopes. This lets us see all the tiny machinery, all the little organelles, buzzing away inside. It's at this incredible level of detail that our tour really begins. Okay, first stop on our tour, the animal cell. And honestly, the best way to wrap your head around it is to picture a huge, sprawling city. Every single little part has a critical job, and they all have to work together to keep the whole metropolis from falling apart. You know, every city needs a command center, right? A city hall. And in our cellular city, that's the nucleus. This is where all the big decisions get made, and all the super important information is kept under lock and key. So, let's peek inside this city hall. The nucleus itself is the whole main office building. Inside that, you've got the nucleolus, who's kind of like the busy office manager making sure everything is running smoothly. And the chromatin? Oh, that's the really important stuff. Think of it like the filing cabinets that hold the city's master blueprints. You know, the DNA. Okay, a city isn't just about paperwork, right? It needs to make stuff. It needs factories and a way to ship things out. So now, let's head over to the industrial part of town. What we're looking at here is the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER for short. These are basically the city's assembly lines. See those little dots on the rough ER? Those are the ribosomes. They're the actual workers on the line, building all the products. Then, once everything's made, it heads over to the Golgi apparatus. This is like the city's main post office, or maybe a giant Amazon fulfillment center. It sorts, packages, and ships everything out in these little delivery trucks called vesicles. Now, there are two other things a city absolutely cannot function without: power and a sanitation department. If either of those go down, the whole city grinds to a halt. So that brings us to the last couple of essential services in our metropolis. The mitochondria, these are the power plants. They are working 24/7, just churning out energy to keep the lights on everywhere. And then you've got the cleanup crew, the lysosomes and peroxisomes. These guys are the city's recycling and waste disposal teams, breaking down old parts and garbage to keep the city from getting buried in its own trash. Okay, tour of Animal City complete. Now let's hop over to a completely different world, the plant cell. And while you'll see a lot of the same departments, the whole design philosophy is different. Think less of a sprawling city and more like a superstructured, self-sufficient fortress. And the very first thing you notice when you approach the plant fortress is its defenses. I mean, this thing is built for structure, for protection. And it all starts with this massive outer boundary. So here's a huge difference right off the bat. A plant cell basically has two layers of security. On the very, very outside, you have this thick, rigid cell wall. That's the main fortress wall, giving the whole plant its strength. But inside that, there's still a cell membrane, which acts like a security checkpoint at the inner gate, carefully controlling who and what gets to pass through. You know, a fortress, unlike a city, has to be able to survive on its own, right? It can't always count on supply trucks coming in. And that's why plant cells have this incredible built-in system for making their own power and their own food. And this is the absolute game changer, the chloroplast. You can think of these as a combination of solar panels and a food factory, all rolled into one. They soak up sunlight and use that energy to create their own food through photosynthesis. This is something
totally unique to our plant fortress. You will not find these in Animal City.
Okay, so we've done the city tour, we've explored the fortress. Now it's time for the main event, the showdown. Let's put these two side by side and really nail down the key differences. All right, difference number one, the border. An animal cell's outer layer is just that flexible membrane. That's what allows for movement, for changing shape. But a plant cell, its outermost layer is that super tough, rigid cell wall, which gives it a fixed, unbending structure. Next up, storage. You can think of these vacuoles as water tanks or little warehouses. In animal cells, you've got several small ones, kind of like little storage closets for short-term needs. But in plant cells, wow, it's totally different. They usually have one single enormous central vacuole that can take up most of the cell's space. It's not just for storing water. It actually pushes against the cell wall to help keep the plant rigid.
So let's just boil it down to the three big takeaways from our tour. A rigid cell wall? Nope, not in animals, only in plants. Chloroplasts, the little food factories? Again, plants only. And finally, the storage tanks. Animals have a bunch of small ones, while plants have that one giant one. Easy as that.
Okay, great. They're different. But so what? Why does any of this matter? What's the real-world impact of having a cell wall or not having one? Let's connect these tiny little differences to the actual living things we see every single day.
It really all boils down to this. That rigid cell wall, stacked one on top of the other millions of times, that's what lets a massive tree stand tall against gravity. But for an animal, that flexible membrane is everything. It's what allows our muscles to contract, what lets us move. So you see, form follows function right down to the tiniest, most fundamental level. So, think about it. These tiny microscopic structures are what define the fundamental difference between a redwood and a rabbit, between the entire plant and animal kingdoms. It really makes you wonder, right? As our technology lets us see inside the cell with even more clarity, what's the next big secret about life itself that we're about to uncover? Thanks for coming along on the tour.